Sure, if you want, I can monitor things.
Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Just prior to inviting Sia to do our land acknowledgement, I would like to make a comment that our chair, Mark Mullen, is currently in Toronto. He is with a delegation from our school board attending an ICE symposium, the Institute of Catholic Education. So he will be trying to come in virtually, but he is a busy guy right now in Toronto. And Director D'Amico has come in virtually. So could I now invite Sia to please do our land acknowledgement?
We pay respects to the Algonquin people who are the traditional guardians of this land. We acknowledge your long-standing relationship with this territory, which remains unceded. We pay respect to all Indigenous people in this region from all nations across Canada who call Ottawa home. We acknowledge the traditional knowledge keepers, both young and old, and we honor their courageous leaders, past, present, and future.
Thank you. And Father, could you lead us in prayer?
In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. The Easter Challenge. Every year it happens, Earth shakes her sleepy head, still a bit wintered and dull, and feels new life stirring. Every year cocoons give up their treasures, fresh shoots push through brown leaves, seemingly dead branches shine with green, and singing birds find their way home. Every year we hear the stories. Empty tomb, surprised grievers, runners with news and revelation, unexpected encounters, conversation on the road, tales of new filling with fish, and breakfast on a seashore. And every year, the dull and dead in us meets our Easter challenge, to be open to the unexpected, to believe beyond our security, to welcome God in every form, and trust in our own greening. And we ask you this through Christ our Lord. Amen. And please remember the following person who has passed away. Dr. John Dorner, retired principal at the Ottawa Catholic School Board. Eternal rest grant unto him, O Lord, and let perpetual light shine upon him. May he rest in peace. Amen. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Please stand for our national anthem. We have no delegations tonight, but we do have a public session. Just prior to inviting Mr. Doak to speak, I'd just like to read out some reminders about our public session. This is a regularly scheduled business meeting of the Ottawa Catholic School Board, and our public session presenters have been appraised of the proper protocol for their presentations, and guidelines are also shown on the inside cover of the regular board meeting agenda. For the benefit of all present, I would like to remind you of the following guidelines. This is not a forum for open discussion. No decision or debate relative to the presentation will be made this evening. Thank you, and we can have Mr. Doak. Good evening, Mr. Doak. We are going, as you know from reading the guidelines, we will be giving you 3 minutes.
Yes.
Do we have Mr. Doak seem to disappear? Superintendent Edwards?
He's there.
Oh, is he there? Up at the top. Okay. All right. So, Mr. Doak, we're going to start the timer now, and Associate Director Donaghy will be reminding you at the 1 minute mark, and then we will be telling you when your presentation is over. So if you would like to go ahead.
Yes, James Doak, a Catholic ratepayer in Ottawa. If you didn't buy books like This Book is Gay by James Dawson, you'd have more money to spend on other things, which would be for people like autism and things like that, special needs. I'll read a couple excerpts from the book. Just wait a sec here.
Point of order, Madam Chair?
Yes?
Yes.
Yes.
Madam Chair, point of order. Can you tell us what the topic is that he's going to be presenting on?
The topic is on cost savings for the school board. And Mr. Doak, we're assuming that that's what you're going to be speaking on?
That's correct. If you didn't buy books like this, there'd be more, you'd have a lot of ways to save money. What is the clock at? Can you start back at 3, please?
Yes.
So it's at 3 minutes?
3 minutes starts now.
Thank you. There's 3 sections I like to read from this book. If you didn't buy this book, you'd have more money. Cost savings. Handies. Perhaps the most important skill you can master as a gay or bi man in this is the timeless classic, the hand job. The good news is you can
Mr.
practice on your...
Doak.
Yes.
Point of order?
Point of order.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't feel that the topic that he's speaking to is cost savings, so I would like you to rule his presentation out of order, please.
The book, I want to explain that books like this are not a good use of money. And if you didn't buy books like this, you'll
Point
have
of
other
order.
money.
Mr. Doak, I haven't ruled on the point of order yet. I'd like to point out that you can speak in general terms of how we are going to have cost savings, and you have related to us that not buying this book would save money. However, I'm not sure if we have to hear passages from the book at this time. So I'm going to ask you to please stick to budget savings, or we will be ending your presentation.
Sure. Yes, the budget, you spend money on books that talk about hand jobs, blow jobs, oral
Point
sex.
of order, please. I think the presentation is out of order. I'd like you to terminate the presentation, please.
Mr. Doak, could you please restrict your comments to the titles of books, that we can save money on not buying, rather than the content of the books? That is something that we can look into later. But if we're going to stick to cost savings, I would prefer that.
So,
Otherwise, I'm
actually,
going to have to stop.
what I'll do is in 2 weeks, I will make a presentation, and the topic will be This Book is Gay, and excerpts from the book. So that will actually be the topic. And I'll present in 2 weeks for my full 3 minutes. So thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much. You can submit that as you would any other normal public session, and we can rule on whether or not we will listen to it. Thank you very much for coming.
There's no ruling. I can do a 3-minute presentation on any topic.
Yes, thank you very much. Can we have approval of the agenda, please? Trustee Spencer, Trustee Warren, and seconded by Trustee McEwen. All in favor? Any opposed? And carried. Section F, we have a memo from the Superintendent of Student Success and Intermediate Secondary Parent Engagement, St. Michael's, Ottawa. I'd like to welcome, a special welcome to Sean Kelly, Deb Langdon, and Micheline Boulot.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and we are pleased to be joined by the Principal and Vice Principal of St. Michael, Ottawa, Deb Langdon, and Micheline Boulot, who will speak about parent engagement successes at the school. And I'll turn things over to our guests.
Good evening, Madam Chair, trustees, and senior executive. On behalf of Micheline and myself, I would like to share our appreciation for the opportunity to share with you the successes that we have had over the past few years, despite COVID, in engaging and welcoming our community to St. Ottawa Catholic School, St. Michael, Ottawa. In an effort to be community, our goal was to create a school environment where parents are welcomed, respected, and supported in their journey to become partners in their children's learning. As a school team made up of administrators and teachers, we have consciously made it a priority to create a welcoming community environment where parents can join their children for fun, a sense of belonging, and become active partners in their child's education. To do this, we have planned a family event for every month of our school year. Where appropriate, we incorporate opportunities to share practical and easy ideas for how parents can support their children's learning. Events like our math nights also provide parents with helpful resources and tools. The presence of staff at these evenings shares the message that student learning is a team effort, and students are always excited to see their teachers outside of the regular learning day.
Leaders know that visibility matters. A welcoming environment is essential if you want to increase engagement in our schools. As school leaders, we can be seen outside every morning to greet our school community as parents, students, and staff members join collectively for each new day. And the same can be done for our dismissal procedure, where we're outside to ensure safe dismissal, not only for our students, but to also be easily accessible for our staff and our parents. Although we do not have a formal school council at St. Michael, Ottawa, we do plan and host school meetings, monthly school meetings, and we do try to host our meetings during different times of the day, evenings, and different format. Sometimes 4 come, others sometimes 6, and it happened that no one joined us. Nonetheless, every meeting is important, and every participant is also important.
With funds from our pro grant, we have hosted 2 math nights and 1 literacy night. For our math nights, our participants went home with a commercially prepared math kit containing manipulatives to teach concepts from each of the math strands. These included coins, pattern blocks, cubes, and dice. Children and their parents were invited to join a grade panel, kinder, primary, or junior, and the educator modeled games and activities using the contents of the kit. Throughout the session, the educator offered ideas and tips for parents to continue this learning at home and support the work that our teachers are doing at school. Our literacy night also saw children and parents join educators by panel to hear a read aloud. Every child received a grade-appropriate book to keep. Teachers shared strategies for developing comprehension and modeled the joy and power of a really good story. It was our goal, and is our goal, to empower parents to feel confident in their ability to help their children strengthen their math and literacy skills. We are still hearing stories from parents of how they are using these kits at home. We have hosted 2 very successful family games nights. Once again, our teachers hosted these evenings by panel, kindergarten, primary, and junior. Each child who registered received an age-appropriate game that they could keep and take home. As the session progressed, the educator was able to make links to both literacy and mathematical skills. We encourage parents to play family games, thereby building communication, turn-taking, self-regulation, and attention skills. And we have seen firsthand that often our parents have as much or more fun than the children do at these evenings. 2 weeks ago, we hosted our very first family bingo night. It was one of our most attended and successful events, and we didn't even have food. We regularly play school-wide bingo. This evening added parent excitement. A prize for every child made for a gym full of laughters and smiles, and the evening was just purely fun for parents and children.
Just before March break, on March 10th, the Friday, we hosted a family cultural day. This was our first event at St. Michael. Each class hosted various cultural activities with a focus on the arts, dance, music, visual arts. Our students, staff, and parents were encouraged to wear traditional vestments or cultural clothing. Meet the Teacher scavenger hunt and pizza dinner in September. Our muffin breakfast during Catholic Education Week, and our June family barbecue. One thing that we know is that food brings people together, and it is always a great draw. Through our children's support funding and PIC funding, we have been able to organize events that include snacks or dinners, making it easier for our families to get here and participate. No pressure to get dinner organized and get back to school on time. How do you feel that we at St. Michael, Ottawa try to promote parent and community engagement in our school?
There's a lot of activities after school hours, not just the regular parent-teacher interviews. St. Michael's does a lot of activities during the year, such as the school barbecue. We had a games night coming up this week. We just finished a bingo night, and earlier in the school year we had, what was it, the scavenger hunt and a pizza night? And a lot of people showed up, so a lot of families really enjoy that. The kids look forward to any kind of activity outside of school hours, so it's really good for them.
How do you as a family benefit and appreciate our monthly engagement activities, and why do you feel it's important for your families to participate?
I think it's crucial. It's absolutely, it's imperative as a parent to be involved in what they're doing and their world, and they're exploring, and this is what they do Monday through Friday. It's their social group. It's how the excitement they have knowing that we're coming to partake and be in their gym and see their class, and it's as a parent's perspective, there's nothing greater to be a part of it.
How do you feel that we...
And we see that the work we are putting in is providing us benefits. We see the numbers at our events increasing each year. More parents and different parents are joining us. Parents reach out when they need support, advice, or help. And we have established very good lines of communication between our parents and guardians, our educators, and ourselves as administration. This means that we can solve problems and issues and support our students in their learning and their overall well-being. There is a sense of pride and belonging at St. Michael for all who enter our building. We hear this on a daily basis from our families and our community.
Thank you for the opportunity to share our story with you this evening.
Thank you very much. Do we have any questions for our presenters? Trustee Coburn?
Thank you for the presentation. It's quite innovative. My question is, I can understand the parents' interest and the students' interest. My question is more around staffing and staffing's participation after hours and that. As trustees, we get concerned with senior admin's participation after hours at these exciting board meetings, but just wondering how staff reacts to being involved in some of these activities after hours.
Through you, Madam Chair. Thank you for the question, Trustee. When we have an event, we put it out to our staff, and it is invitational. We explain what we're doing, and our staff as a whole know that this is our priority, to engage our families, to engage our students, and our staff see the value. Some of our families or some of our staff have young children and not able to join us, and we recognize that. We've both been there. But for those who can, in some cases, they make arrangements or they just simply sign up each and every time. And it really makes a difference because the message it sends is we are a team, we are a community, and the kids get so excited to see their teachers, and they really truly believe now that the teachers sleep and live at the school.
Anyone else?
Through you, Madam Chair, maybe just a quick comment, if that's okay. Thank you for sharing your story tonight. And I always say to myself that the way to a man's heart is through his stomach. So when I got caught on slide number 9 there when you're talking about muffins and year-end barbecue, so thanks for sharing. But it's always good for me and obviously our fellow trustees to understand, what's going on out there in the schools and, take your story and, talk to our schools about initiatives they could be running to bring their community back together and get more parent involvement within the school. So thank you for sharing what you have tonight. It's great.
Through you, Madam Chair, thank you very much for your comments. They are appreciated.
Anyone else? My turn. In the 5 years that I've been the trustee at St. Michael's, I've been very, very excited to attend many events, virtual math nights, barbecues, muffin breakfasts, and the other night at games night. It was such a cool thing to see all these kids coming in with their parents, playing games, and then getting to bring the game home. So if they were in the middle of a game, they could continue it. So I have to give huge kudos to principal, vice principal, and staff for the commitment they're showing to building community. And I can honestly say, when you're in that building with those parents, they feel like it's home. So thank you very much for your commitment to this. It's very evident in your school.
Through you, Madam Chair, again, we thank you for your words. They do mean a lot. It really is a passion of the heart. But I would be remiss if I did not say that it comes with a lot of support, not only from our staff, but certainly from our board as a whole, and our CSPA through ProGrant, and through funding that we receive from the board that makes this possible. And we are grateful because it makes an idea and a vision in our head come to life. And at the end of the day, it is our children who benefit, and that is why we are here.
Thank you very much. Can I have someone move the acceptance of this presentation? Trustee Coburn and Trustee Phelan. All in favor? Opposed and carried. Thank you. Do we have any declarations of conflict of interest? Seeing none, can I have a mover to confirm the regular board meeting minutes of April 25th, 2023? Moved by Trustee Melito, seconded by Trustee Phelan. All in favor? Opposed and carried. We have no unfinished business from our previous meeting. We have no trustee motions. Presentations and consideration of committee reports, we have none. Presentation and consideration of staff or trustee reports. We have a memo from Associate Director of Education, Mrs. Donahue, and we have our school improvement plan, school goals, truth and reconciliation, and we have presenters, Principal J.P. Kluche from Notre Dame and VP Kevin Shannon from St. Emily. So I'll hand it to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Alex, I will ask you to move ahead on the slides for me. Thank you, since I don't have the clicker at this end of the table. So as Madam Chair has let us know, we have 2 administrators with us, and I thank them for joining us today. So we'll go to the next slide. They've already been introduced. So as our Board of Trustees knows, as part of our School Improvement Equity Plan, as it was called SEEP this year, we've included a Truth and Reconciliation call to action, as this is one of the goals we've asked our schools to look at. So schools were asked to select one of the 94 calls to action, and we did highlight for schools some that had a real education texture and nuance, but they could pick any one of the 94 calls to action as a school focus for this current year. So the Indigenous Education Team, that's part of our Leading and Learning Department, has been working with school teams to support schools in their selected goals. So I'll ask Alex to go to the next slide. So I'm just going to give a very quick overview of what we've collected from our schools in terms of some examples of elementary goals, and then secondary, and then probably more importantly, I'll turn it over to our two administrators to give specific examples and to talk at a bit more length of what they've done in their schools. So as you can see from the slide, the elementary schools, many of our schools have worked on developing and sharing student land acknowledgements, so from the voice of our students. They've looked at the grandfather teachings from our Indigenous learnings, and they've been linking those to the gospel values. They've also been providing students opportunities to increase awareness of present-day Indigenous issues. And then they've also looked at developing Indigenous student voice through a Grade 6 Equity Advisor Committee. So we have this in some of our K-6 schools. Similarly, some of our elementary schools have worked with community partners and Indigenous elders and artists to provide deep learning opportunities for all staff and students, and we often see many examples of this on Twitter. I'll just go to the next slide, Alex, and speak to intermediate secondary goals. So again, from our schools, we've collected, and I have the pleasure, as you know, of working with our two student trustees and the Student Senate. So we discuss the ISAs, or the Indigenous Student Associations, that we have at some of our high schools. So again, another opportunity for student voice in our 7 to 12 schools, and an opportunity for leadership. Some of our secondary schools are also providing opportunities for Indigenous culture in the classroom and school communities, similar to what they're doing in the elementary panel. Many of our schools are building educator capacity by integrating Indigenous knowledge and teaching methods into the classroom. And last but by no means least, our schools have been displaying Indigenous artwork and poetry throughout the school. So as I mentioned, Madam Chair, these are just some of the examples, but I'm going to turn it over to the Vice Principal at St. Emily, Kevin Shannon, to talk specifically in a little bit more depth about what St. Emily has been doing.
Good evening, Madam Chair, trustees, and executive. St. Emily's been working on celebrating and honoring Indigenous culture, and it's my pleasure to share some examples with you. We've invited members of the Indigenous community to come in and talk to several of our classrooms about their culture and customs. The picture on the left is a tweet from Mrs. Gordon's kindergarten classroom, thanking Stephanie Saunders, our Indigenous consultant, for teaching them about land acknowledgements, why it's important, what they mean, and how important it is to be grateful for these gifts. As a school, we took part in Truth and Reconciliation Day, or Orange Shirt Day. Staff and students wore orange. Each class contributed to an orange shirt display we had up in our foyer. Teachers taught lessons, and we had special school-wide announcements to help honor the healing journey of survivors and their families, and to be part of the ongoing process of reconciliation. Could we go to the next slide, please? Our teachers often integrate Indigenous culture into lessons. These are a couple of hallway displays from this year at St. Emily. The picture on the left is showcasing some grade 5 student art from Miss Meyer's class. This was an art and literacy lesson based on a traditional Métis story, The Giving Tree. And the story emphasizes Métis core values and beliefs such as kindness, courage, tolerance, love, patience, and the connection between the Creator and Mother Earth. Our next slide. And as part of our School Improvement and Equity Plan this year, our deep learning global competency that we're focusing on is character. Each month as a school community, we focus on a character trait to work on. We've decided to use the 7 grandfather teachings as the basis for our traits. Once a month, we gather in the gym to learn about one of the 7 grandfather teachings, and we make that a focus for our students and staff to work on that teaching to help develop character. We discuss how each grandfather teaching connects to our gospel teachings and values, and what displaying that trait looks like at St. Emily. We have a display in our foyer where we celebrate students demonstrating these traits and values. Right now, I'd pass it over to Mr. Cloutier.
Thank you very much. And thank you for the opportunity to share about Indigenous education at Notre Dame and share the work being done by Notre Dame staff. In our SEEP, you will find that we are working to reestablish the use of restorative practices. We had a very well-attended restorative practices book club, and we've been using circles in staff meetings. We've had staff trained by the International Institute for Restorative Practices. We've been working to increase opportunities to learn about Indigenous culture in all courses, and we've been studying culturally responsive teaching in staff meetings and book clubs. Teachers have been collaborating with community partners, elders, traditional teachers, and artists. We continue to respond to feedback from community partners to improve best practices in NBE, where teachers are focusing on celebrating Indigenous excellence. The next slide, please. We've had opportunities for Indigenous students to meet and build as communities. So we have an Indigenous Student Association going right now, where we coordinate cultural teachings and experiences so that Indigenous students can connect and reconnect with their identity. We also have opportunities for allyship within the school, notably Indigenous History Month, student-written land acknowledgements, Truth and Reconciliation Day was observed, as well as Red Shirt Day. And lastly, and very exciting, we have formed a new partnership with a school in the Northwest Territories. So some of our students and teachers had a chance to go to Fort Providence and live on the land for 5 days to have an immersion experience in Indigenous culture.
Through you, Madam Chair, I'd just like to thank JP Coutier and Kevin Shannon, and any of us would be happy to answer any questions.
Do we have any questions? No one? Trustee Coburn?
Thank you. Yeah, I don't have a question, just a comment. The program looks very good, and I guess commend you both for introducing this and seeing it evolve within our school community. Maybe I do have one question while I'm rambling here. I guess I can understand probably more in the secondary panel, sort of recognition this, but in the elementary panel, I would think maybe it's not, maybe it's less of a challenge, but maybe if you could speak to the elementary panel in terms of their ability to maybe comprehend some of these teachings.
Through you, Madam Chair. Some of what we do is we use some of for example, the 7 grandfather teachings. They work really well in the elementary setting. So each grandfather teaching is represented by an animal. And so especially our younger students, they connect really well to that. It's given us a common language in the school community. Sometimes you deal with a student who's been brave enough to admit that they've made a mistake, and you can say to a grade 1 student, thank you for being like the bear and having the courage to do that thing that was really hard. And some of the other cultural things that we do is all done in an age-appropriate way, and at a good level, I think.
Anyone else?
Through you, Madam Chair. Brian, I think you got me thinking a little bit here, but more wrapped around a question for you, JP, if that's okay. But in your last slide there, just showing how you've created that partnership with Northwest Territories. Can you describe maybe what your students or staff brought back to your school and shared with you, and some of the findings and the learnings?
Of course, through you, Madam Chair. I actually had the opportunity to go myself as a vice principal when I was at St. Pius, and seeing the students come back, I know the experience there. I had some idea, and coming back in the Indigenous Students Association and talking to the teachers that went, their plans are to kind of roll out this partnership school-wide and make more connections to the northern communities. So through using technology, Google Meets, to learn more about northern cultures and what the students are experiencing in the north. So that's the next plan for the teachers that have gone and come back, and the students that have gone and come back.
Anyone else? Well, I'd also like to thank you for your presentation. I like the way you've integrated Indigenous culture into many areas of the curriculum, and that's allowed for a more authentic experience for the students. So thank you for sharing what you have. Okay, can we have a mover and a seconder for the presentation? Moved by Trustee Warren and seconded by Trustee McEwen, that the memorandum from the Associate Director dated May 3rd, 2023, entitled School Improvement Plan, School Goals, Truth and Reconciliation, be in favor, be received. All in favor. Be kind. Opposed and carried. Next, we have a memo from the Associate Director of Education, approval of policies rescinded, new, and revised. Associate Director Donaghy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As part of the annual policy review, a number of rescinded, new, and revised policies are being brought forward for the approval of the Board of Trustees. As you know, these policies have been vetted by affiliate and stakeholder groups, reviewed by the Executive Committee, the Policies and Procedures Steering Committee, and trustees discussed and provided input on these policies during the trustee policy input sessions. The 21 policies listed on the electronic agenda have been seen, vetted, and reviewed by the trustees during this process. The original board meeting agenda included in this memo other policies that trustees may not have seen. There were no changes or minor changes to the administrative procedures of these policies. These policies have been removed from the memo and will be added to the next trustee support meeting, where trustees can decide on the process going forward for policies such as these with no changes or minor changes to administrative procedures. So today we'll just look at the 12 policies that have gone through that process I just described. So I did want to add, Madam Chair, a thank you to all of the trustees, especially including our 2 student trustees, for the time spent on reviewing these policies and also for the valuable input given from the student perspective, from the trustee perspective, as well as the input we received from all of our other stakeholder groups. I would be happy, Madam Chair, to answer any questions at this time.
Do we have any questions? No questions? So I will read the motion. The motion reads that the memorandum from the Associate Director of Education dated May 3rd, 2023, and entitled Approval of Policies Rescinded.
Deemed to be read.
Thank you. Can I have a mover? I was just waiting for that. Trustee McEwen, seconded by Trustee Moore. As I read it. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Do you have a comment?
I just want to thank staff for going through the extras. I know at times it was probably a little bit onerous to go through these, but I want to thank them for doing that. It was a fulsome and thorough, I think, review of these policies, so just want to thank them for that.
Thank you, and I'd like to echo that. Thanks. Thank you. Next, we have a memo from the Superintendent of Student Success Intermediate Secondary Grade 9 Assessment Update. Superintendent Kelly.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And following a change to the evaluation practices for our grade 9 courses, school councils at each of our high schools were surveyed to get some feedback regarding the schedule during the traditional exam period. And I will go over some information about that this evening for you. So to begin, just a short background, and I know that the trustees are aware of our assessment and evaluation and the fact that we derive our instructions and expectations from the ministry's document, Growing Success. And as part of that document, it indicates that 70% of a high school student's final evaluation is based on their coursework throughout the semester, and 30% of that grade is based on a final evaluation administered at or toward the end of the course, and that could include an examination for some of our students, a performance task, an essay, or other method of evaluation suitable to the course content. So a summary of the expectations of boards and schools regarding the assessment and evaluation. These practices around assessment may vary from board to board. However, these particular expectations are consistent across the province. So from the student experience, During the 2021 and 21-22 school years, the Ministry of Education gave boards the option of foregoing high school exams as a response to the learning experience during the pandemic. And during those 2 years, no OCSB high school students wrote exams. And given that exams had not been written for 2 years, the board's Assessment and Evaluation Central Committee began a review of assessment and evaluation practices from grades 9-2 through to 12. That process involved surveying department heads, teachers, reviewing student feedback, and taking into account the focus on mental health and well-being that we are all aware of as a result of the pandemic. A number of updates were applied following this review, and the majority of these focused on a more balanced approach between exams and summative tasks across many high school courses from grades 10 to 12. In addition, based on the information, the committee made the decision to use the Rich Summative Task, or RST, for grade 9 students as opposed to the exam beginning this current school year. So grade 9 students would be, their final evaluation would be made up of the summative task as opposed to a traditional exam format. Replacing these exams for our grade 9 students with a rich summative task is an approach consistent with a number of other boards in the province as well. Our approach during semester 1 had grade 9 teachers using the exam period for credit intervention time to support some students, and these students may have needed additional time to complete activities. They may have had specific assignments that were missed in terms of being submitted, and it may be that the teacher required a conference with the student or wanted to focus on some of those discussions with the student to attribute to the assessment and evaluation of the course. We recognize that students who were meeting with success at this time did not have formal academic responsibilities. And following questions from parents and guardians, we asked high schools to bring this to their school councils to get additional feedback from parents and guardians. The majority of high schools shared back anecdotal information that supported an extension of the academic program for grade 9 students into that traditional exam period. So based on this information, grade 9 teachers will be asked to extend the summative evaluation period into the traditional exam period for grade 9 students beginning this semester. And during the time allotted to the traditional exam period at schools, I can provide you a little bit of an example of how this would look. Where students in grades 10 to 12 that have courses with exams, they would write one exam per day corresponding with their classroom period. So an example, if a grade 11 student has math period 1, they would be writing that exam on period 1, or day 1, sorry, of the exam period. The change for grade 9 students is that summative task work would extend into this exam period. So to provide you with an example, if a grade 9 student had a course schedule in a semester of English, math, geography, and religion, on day 1 of the traditional exam period, that student would be working on period 1, so English summative task activities for that period in that morning. For their period 2 or their second day during that exam period, it would be math. They would be working on EQAO summative testing during that period. For the third day, they would be extending their geography summative tasks into that third day. And then finally, I mentioned their period 4 was religion, and that summative task would extend into the fourth day of the exam period. Some of the examples of activities that would constitute this extension of the summative task into that exam period that week would be an extension of the formal RST work that students had started in the classroom. Could be time to complete the grade 9 EQAO testing, as I mentioned in terms of the example of a grade 9 math class. It could include teacher-student conferencing around final evaluations where the full class is there and the teacher is working with individuals while they are working on their summative task. Or it could be that the teacher is working with small groups of students, and/or it could include student presentation to peers as part of that summative task. So this is an overview of what we are looking at in terms of our second semester schedule for our grade 9 students, and I'd be happy to take any questions at this time.
Do we have any questions? Superintendent Moore, then Superintendent Moore.
Well, first of all, I was going to go with the pay raise.
Thank you, be kind.
I like the idea of the pay raise. Superintendent Kelly, hello.
Hello.
My question is, when you've got a bunch of 14-year-olds sitting in a classroom with maybe the next room is grade 11s, as you said, writing math, it's the noise disruptions because it's a different type of test for the grade 11s. So how are the schools planning to mitigate that?
Through you, Madam Chair, I think this is something, Trustee Moore, that we are dealing with constantly. We have conflicting classroom activities going on. We have moved high school exams back into the classroom from the gym, so there has been a change. Once upon a time, it was, you could hear a pin drop. I think we're at that point where maybe some extra noise even brings down the levity of the situation. So I think teachers are going to be able to manage that very well.
Trustee Warren.
Thanks to you, Madam Chair. Great presentation, and it's interesting to see how the last several years have kind of evolved when it comes to the thought of exams and how that looks like. I know last year students writing exams again for the first time after a couple of years of not doing it was pretty stressful. So grade 9s, and this is kind of a two-part question, grade 9s, have we thought about just putting back into full exams just like grade 10 and onwards, and what the impact of that would look like? And the other part is for all the grades, are we weighing the exams too heavily because we're putting so much pressure on one particular moment of time that they have to memorize everything throughout the entire year and semester? And with the mark with that, sorry, it's about a 15-part question. With that, what was the data looking like for grade averages when they didn't have to write exams through COVID period, and then they start writing exams again? So if you can find some questions in there somewhere.
Through you, Madam Chair, I think I can, and good questions. I appreciate it. For our grade 9 students, this was a recognition that the focus of their learning experience, and the learning experience, frankly, of all our students 9 to 12, is such that continual knowledge testing isn't part of our day-to-day expectations. And I know you're aware, given some of the presentations we provided to our trustee group, that we're looking at experiential learning. We're looking at project-based activities for students. So to simply revert to a test at the end that is about knowledge primarily didn't fit our deep learning approach with students. Now, why do we have exams at grade 10 through 12? Well, we also recognize that there's a practical application for students moving on to post-secondary opportunities. So we will continue at this time to have formal exams for grade 10 to 12 students moving forward. But again, in those grades 10 to 12, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're content-based exams either. Teachers may make the decision to have a more focused task assignment. So we are, as you mentioned, things have changed, and I think we're looking at changes to assessment and evaluation as well. And I think another part of your question was about the comparative of students not having exams to write and reverting now back to exams. That's something we'll take a look at where we are with credit accumulation this year, and we'll take a look at what that comparative was.
Good. Trustee Coburn and then Trustee McEwen.
Great, thanks for this, Sean. First of all, it was interesting. I learned something that there's an option to provide an examination, a performance, an essay, or another method of evaluation, which I didn't realize. As somebody who probably is not a strong supporter of exams, it's interesting that that is a basis for evaluating somebody's performance, which I think is probably more relevant. My question is, we surveyed the parents, and surprise, surprise, they want them in the classroom. Did we survey the students?
Through you, Madam Chair. Originally, the information that we took and gathered with the original decision to remove exams from grade 9 primarily came from our school climate surveys that we had with students, and we derived from that it may not be a priority for grade 9 students to have an exam at the end of their courses, and I think, as you mentioned, they were looking for other opportunities to display their learning.
Trustee McEwen.
Thank you, Madam Chair, through you. So at the end of the year, this year, for grade 9, so if I'm a student that, this wouldn't be me, but I've done everything and I don't have anything due and I've finished my EQO testing, will I be attending class during that exam 4 days or not?
Through you, Madam Chair, student McEwen would be attending those days because the expectation is this is part of the academic program. It's part of the expectation that the teachers have. So the course hasn't finished before this period. It's an extension of the course into this period.
Okay, and that will be clear, sorry, through you, Ms. That will be communicated to students and parents.
Through you, Madam Chair, we are beginning this communication tomorrow with our principals, yes.
Trustee Moore, then Trustee.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. I'm sorry I'm a trustee again. I enjoyed being a superintendent. It was a good few minutes. Just quick question. So this day one, it's just a half day, or is it just a one block that they're going to be?
We're looking for a period of time around 120 minutes. Sorry, through you, Madam Chair. We recognize that this corresponds to the amount of time that students would need to complete the EQAO testing, the majority of our students. So we'd like to align the other courses with the same amount of time. We also want to make it a valuable period of time. If we looked at the regular period of a high school class, which is 75 minutes, and didn't feel that that was adequate to ensure students recognize the value in coming in for that period. So we're looking at 120 minutes, 2 hours for students. About the regular length of the majority of our regular exams.
And Trustee Warren, thank you. I'm having a hard time. Do you have a question?
Oh, this is going to be hard.
Got you on this one.
Yes, I have a question. Through Madam Chair. So I think it's great what you're doing. I fully support it. Do you feel it's a good transition into going to grade 10 to allow them to get ready for the next phase, which will be exams into their life?
Through you, Madam Chair. I think this is a good balance with, as we mentioned, the grade 9 program following through to a summative task, whereas for our students in grade 10, 11, 12, that provides them with a number of years experience with a tool that likely will become useful for them if they do seek out some post-secondary opportunities, not all, but it does give them that familiarity with the exam process through those years.
Trustee Melito.
Through you, Madam Chair, just a quick congratulations on a job well done. I know this was a last-second item because it all came up during the last exams, and congratulations to your staff for coming up with a quick solution. The question is, will it be reevaluated at the end, moving forward?
Through you, Madam Chair, we will always review these processes, and this is one that we've looked at. We're going to put it into place and absolutely ask some questions at the end of students and parents and staff, just to ensure that this is a process that works. And we do have an assessment and evaluation committee that'll be doing that work, yes.
Any other questions? Can I have a mover and a seconder for this report? Trustee Melito and Trustee Phelan. Moved by Trustee Melito and seconded by Trustee Phelan that the memorandum from the Superintendent of Student Success, Intermediate Secondary, dated May 3rd, 2023, grade 9 assessment scheduled during the exam period be received. All in favor? Opposed? And carried. Next, we have a memo from the Superintendent of Student Success Elementary and Superintendent of Student Success Intermediate Secondary, Reliteracy Numeracy Update, Superintendent Montgomery and Superintendent Kelly.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The ministry released a memo on April 16th with their plan to, and I quote, boost math, writing, and reading skills. We are here to give you an update about this and how we feel confident that we are strongly positioned with a good foundation to move forward when the ministry does reveal the full details of their plan this August. So screening. Thank you. The ministry has stated that they will mandate screening twice a year for all kindergarten to grade 2 students. We feel this is an excellent strategy and will actually change lives. We are waiting on the details from the ministry, but as you can see on this slide, we have done a lot already this year in terms of screening strategies and professional development. So, as you can see here, all grade 1 to 8 classroom teachers, ELL, resource teachers, speech and language pathologists have all been trained on the screening tool that we are using currently, which is called DIBBLS. We've created a fact document that is being used already widely amongst administration and staff around the DIBBLS and the importance of screening. We have been able to, with the LT department's collaboration, been able to use our Compass data tool to be able to input the DIBBLS data, and that means that as central staff, we can see the data system-wide. And we've also trained our principals on the screening tool and how they can read the data so that they can use that to improve their school improvement plan. Next slide, thank you. So even before the ministry announced funds for more educators to support literacy in the most recent memo, as you know, the board prioritized reading intervention and have hired 5.5 dedicated reading intervention itinerant teachers. 2 years ago, we also increased our complement from 1 literacy learning partner to 2 literacy learning partners. To support these changes, we also hired an extra consultants for this past year to help organize much of what we're talking about here tonight. We also have a coordinator who supports literacy and has been instrumental in all of this planning. One other key staff member that's not mentioned on this slide is also our ECE lead. This year, we've established a working group to explore the recommendations in the Right to Read report, and we work closely with Superintendent Benton and the clinicians such as psychologists and SLPs to make this plan go forward. What I say that we're most proud of is that we have at least 1 Tier 3, typically an Empower trained teacher, in every single K-12 school in our system. I recently mentioned this to a ministry advisor for the Alberta government when we were collaborating, and he said, I quote, "This is very impressive and rich and shows that you prioritize literacy." We are only in our first year of having an Empower trained teacher in every single school, so we continue to work with principals around strategies to fully dedicate this time in their schedules. And for the most part, it's going very well. Next slide. As mentioned, we are still waiting on some key information from the ministry. One big piece of information that we are all still waiting on is that there will be a new grade 1 to 8 language arts curriculum, which is huge, released, I will say, any hour. We're all waiting on it. So this will be big for all of us, as we will have to provide professional development to the system on this very important curriculum. The new ENL1W curriculum will provide foundational knowledge and skills that the students need for reading, writing, and oral and visual communication. But again, this has also not been released, but we know it's coming. So resources. So a toolkit was co-created with a diverse group of stakeholders to support the system in selecting text with a culturally responsive and equity lens. It was originally designed for grades intermediate secondary, but is now being adapted to include kindergarten to grade 12 fully. The toolkit ensures that all students are able to see themselves and others authentically reflected in the curriculum materials and strengthens inclusionary practices so that all students, regardless of their learning strengths and needs, find entry points in their texts and in the greater school community. I would also like to draw your attention to the third image on this slide that was co-created with Student Services. It is important to note that 80% of students land in Tier 1, so the bottom of the triangle, which requires regular classroom instruction. 15% of students land in Year 2, where some small interventions are required, but still can happen in the regular classroom. And 5% of students land in Tier 3, where students might require an intervention such as Empower, so that's at the top of the triangle. A message we are working on through the system and why the screening is so important is that if students land, for example, in Tier 2, this does not mean they jump straight to Empower. So if they're struggling with reading, the language out there is that, oh, they must need Empower, but there's a lot of other interventions before they get to Empower. So the resources and strategies listed throughout this triangle are very important and a big part of our professional development. So speaking of professional development, finally, much PD has occurred all year long, and we're very proud of this. During the first weeks of school, we trained all grade 1 teachers, 186 grade 1 teachers, in what's listed on this slide. This was very exciting for us, and especially because we were able to get supply teachers for all of it in the first month of September. So that was very exciting that we were able to train all grade 1 teachers. Another key PD we offered was for the principals, and we titled it Literacy Through the Seasons. It brought a principal through a reading journey of a student from September till June. It was very well received and very creative. Finally, for both math and literacy, our learning partners, they are using a strategy called student-centered coaching. This means, in some cases, the learning partner will support a teacher for 3 weeks straight, 3 times a week. They will co-teach and gradually release their support and also work with the students at the same time. This is a research-proven, excellent approach to professional development, and we're receiving excellent feedback from the educators and from the principals across the system. And I'll pass it along.
So mirroring the approach that we take with literacy, we've got a number of staff members in numeracy supporting both here at the board, directly with teachers, as well as individuals working directly within the schools. So at numeracy, or staffing for numeracy, we have 4 elementary math learning partners, 1 intermediate secondary learning partner working primarily in the grades 7, 8, and 9. And part of that is funded by the Math Strategy Grant. We have 2 numeracy consultants, 1 K-6 coordinator, as well as 1 7-12 coordinator in math. And our math learning partners prioritize their time in schools that have been identified by the ministry. Next slide is rather busy, but highlights a number of the different data options that we have for students, platforms that they can use, and teachers that can use to support the program. I'll highlight a few of these. All kindergarten to grade 6 educators have access to Math Up. This is the core resource for math in elementary, and 7 to 9 teachers have access to this as well. All kindergarten teachers currently have the entire mathology set of big books, student set, as well as the digital content associated with this. Indigenous mathology content has been purchased for all grades 1 to 3, and unfortunately at this point there is no content for 4 to 6, but we are looking at that. Digital math resources include Zorbits for our students in kindergarten to grade 3, Mathletics in grades 4 to 6, Math Space in grades 7 to 12. Everfly, the financial literacy for grade 4 to 12 students. Coding and robotics, which are a big part of our programming at this time, those resources are available through BBots, Unplugged, and Scratch Junior at the kindergarten level. Grades 1 to 3 are able to use BBots, Ozbots, Unplugged, among others. And for our grade 4 to 6 students, Microbit, Ozbots, Sphero. So all of these different platforms are available, again, to educators and students to explore the math curriculum. In terms of professional development, there's a number of activities there that you've seen that we've been involved with. To highlight a few, we had our Saturday Math Conference earlier this year for teachers in grades K to 6 with Marion Small. I was able to attend. We got great feedback from those educators. And central staff have been trained and are implementing, as Shelley mentioned, student-centered coaching where we're focused on students at the desk. And finally,
and just for the sake of time, these are we feel because of all of these strategies we just talked about, that we're really set for whatever the details of the ministry will state in August. But these are the highlights that we're most proud of. So empower trained teacher in every single school. Screening PD has already started, even though that's not been fully mandated by the ministry yet. The hiring of reading intervention teachers and the student-centered coaching.
And in the area of numeracy, student-centered coaching, again, Marion Small's Saturday PD session that we had over 100 student staff involved with, and weekly EQAO tips to support students and educators that go out each week as well. So we thank you, and certainly happy to respond to any questions you might have.
Trustee Moore.
Still a trustee. Thank you, Madam Chair. A question about literacy, Superintendent. It's when you showed us the lovely tiered chart we've seen before, we're used to them. But the question I have about it is personnel and time, because both of the Tier 2 and Tier 3 strategies require set times and set amount of times in order to see real success with the program. And next year, are you looking at some way to support our resource teachers so they can continue and have success with these programs?
Through you, Madam Chair. So great question. So the Tier 2 interventions actually can mostly be done. It's a collaboration between the teacher and the resource teacher. And through such tools such as Lexia, and we have other intervention tools that we're using, if it's dedicated for 10 to 12 weeks, often the students move back down to Tier 1. So, but that's a collaboration between the resource and classroom teacher, so no outside intervention. Tier 3, this is where our reading itinerant teachers come in, and then, but it's also the Empower program, and this is why I say we're proud that we have an Empower trained teacher in every school. We also have our reading itinerant teachers that support, and we also have Empower being supported as well by 4 itinerant teachers through Superintendent Benton's department. So it's actually being supported in quite a number of schools in our system, very intentionally. But because we also have it in every single school, like a resource teacher, we're just working on prioritizing that through the resource staff. At one point or another, the resource staff would have been supporting reading intervention one way or another. Now we're providing them with a really rich tool to do it. So it's just a matter of seeing it that it's not an extra, it's just we're giving you the tool and just try and build it into your schedule. So yes, it's something that we're working on. It's valued. Many of the resource teachers that we're finding it a struggle to find it time in their schedule, which it still can be, when they do get into it, they see the rich value that how it's impacting their students. So.
Thank you. It's true that they do find it rich, and I have heard that across. The question is that oftentimes you go into a school and the resource teacher is teaching a class. So their whole schedule for that day to see those kids for Empower, to back up the teacher who is the Empower teacher, is out the window. So we have a personnel issue, is just people on the ground. Is there going to be some way that we're looking at prioritizing literacy for next year?
Yeah, so luckily the memo does indicate that there is extra funding for literacy. How the details of that will work, and until the board passes the budget in June, then we'll have more details on that. But I have to say that the schools that are making it work very well, it's an absolute team approach. It means that the entire school, the principals, EAs, resource teacher, classroom teacher, has prioritized Empower in that we call it the Empower Hour. And so essentially what's happening is if the resource teacher does have to go cover a class, in many cases the principal takes that 1 hour of that class so that the resource teacher can go cover in those cases where it's like an emergency. So the principals are actually tomorrow, they have a half an hour to share strategies and how they're doing that. So they're being very creative to ensure that that reading intervention is prioritized in the building, and that the message that we're hearing, it's a team effort to know that the value of reading is going to change lives and behavior in the long run. So it definitely is an effort. But luckily, there seems to be some funds coming. We just have to, we'll bring that forward in June.
Thank you. Trustee Coburn?
So my question was going to be the same, specific to Empower. So some of the feedback I've received from some of my parents are, although they're pleased that the program is being rolled out to their children, the consistency around delivery of that program is challenged. So I think you've answered those questions through Trustee Moore. So I would just say it's probably imperative that as I look through both literacy and numeracy, there's a lot of programs here. And it's important that, as well as rolling out programs, that we resource them appropriately, I would say again. So it's more of a comment because I think Sandra asked the question.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Oh, sorry.
Okay, thank you very much for your presentation. It is very exciting as a former elementary school teacher, seeing, the strides that we've made with Empower and screening students. I'm always a data guru to look at that so that you can plan for school improvement, and the student-centered coaching, which is very exciting, and the math resources, making an exciting time to be in education and to be in this school board. So thank you so much for sharing that. Can I have a mover for the accepting this report? Trustee Warren. Seconded by Trustee Phelan. That the memorandum from the Superintendent of Student Success Elementary and the Superintendent of Student Success Intermediate Secondary dated May 3rd, 2023, entitled Literacy Numeracy Update be received. All in favor? Opposed? And carried. Next, I would like to invite the Associate Director of Business Affairs, Memo Re 2023-24 Grants for Student Needs and Priorities Partnership Fund Allocations. Associate Director Shimmons and Shelley Donnelly.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I'm joined tonight for this memo, as well as the next one, by our Manager of Finance, Shelley Donnelly. But first, we'll start with the memo before you, which is the grants for student needs and the PPFs, the priority and partnership funds. So this year's budget has had a lot of significant swings in funding changes, with the top 3 losses from our grants for student needs, which are the GSNs, being first, the loss of $6.5 million in COVID transition funding. Second, the loss of $3.1 million of Indigenous funding. Third, the loss of $5.7 million in transportation funding. Now this 20% will be rolled out over the next 4 years. And I know I said 3, but I'm going to add a 4th. It's one that we were expecting, which is the loss of $4 million in tutoring funding, although we did know that that would be one-time limited funding through the PPFs. So suffice it to say that this year's budget process has and continues to be challenging. On the positive note, however, the PPFs include some new funding to support math standards, reading interventions, and supports for students in grades 7 to 10 for transitions and de-streaming. Just a reminder that the PPF funding is outside of the regular GSNs and in general is announced 1 year at a time. The most significant of the 3 new one-time fundings through the PPF that also support staffing, so therefore significant for us, is first the new math recovery funding of $480,000 for a math recovery lead as well as 3 math facilitators. Second is new funding for early reading enhancement, so this goes to our earlier presentation, the question, $1.3 million, which will support approximately 12 reading intervention positions. And thirdly, new de-streaming and transitions to high school amount, which will support grade 7 to 10 students, $2.4 million, which will support approximately 17 classroom teachers, plus prep in our immediate secondary schools. So the plans for all of those are still being coordinated, and there's still a number of unknowns with some of the GSN grants, such as the enveloping for Indigenous and for transportation, and obviously the results of the final negotiations. Additionally, there are a number of new PPFs, which we hope to hear announcements about, and the criteria as well before the beginning of the school year. So that's just a little bit of an overview, and if we turn to the memo itself right now, I'll just briefly touch on a few highlights. So in the first section of the memo, I believe it's on page 13, we see staffing funds or provision for salary benchmarks, and that is for the $1 per hour increase that is applied to the grants for both the CUPE unit as well as the OCEW, which covers our OPSU staff here. Both of those agreements have been reached centrally, and it was the $1 per hour raise, so they are incorporated, the actuals, into the benchmarks. Then additionally, the grants provide for a provision for salary increases of 1.25% for teachers and some other groups in the board. So we've incorporated those into our budget development in accordance with the directions from the ministry in the memo. It continues to support the SSF allocation, which is the Supports for Student Funds, which gives some enhanced staffing for items like resource teachers, as well as some EAs and some OA hours. And the only other thing I would highlight in that section is just obviously the end of the COVID Learning Recovery Fund. Moving into the next section, which is the realignment of Indigenous education funding. That portion of our grants was previously, or for the current year, is $5.6 million, and for next year, 23-24, will be dropping to $2.5 million, so a change of $3.1 million, primarily attributed to the Indigenous sections that we offer, and instead we will have a new supplemental amount that will provide about $2 million, and it will be based on a per pupil amount as well as a national household survey amount. So that $2 million will be enveloped, and we will hear what we're entitled to spend that on based on hearings with Indigenous stakeholders that will happen this spring, and we'll be told the provincial priorities for that. We do receive about a 50% mitigation funding, so we're losing $3 million. So for the 23-24 year, in order to transition, we will receive $1.5 million in order to transition to the new model. Then moving into special education, we receive special incident portion funding, which is SIP funding, for students that need 2 or more EAs. This is now being frozen and will be increased at our current rate plus some growth rate on a go forward, and they are looking at modernizing that model, so we should expect to see a new model in the future. Flipping over to the next page, page 14, we're into school operations now, which of course is the money in order to operate, maintain the school buildings. So the school operations benchmark has been increased for inflation of 2%. So that's about $1.4 million for our board. Our actual costs are coming in at 8 to 10% increase, or closer to $1.6 million. I know it doesn't equate to each other, but Superintendent Vala has been finding some efficiencies through utility savings and other measures, but we still have a gap between that 2% inflationary benchmark and what we're actually seeing on the ground. Last but not least is student transportation grants. So we do have a new student transportation funding model for the first time in 25 years. It will be fully implemented in 4 years, the $5.7 million transition funding that they're providing. So in 4 years from now, we will see a 20% reduction if the model stays as is, in addition to cost increases over that 4-year period. So we have some work to do in that particular envelope. We're still waiting on some of the information about the new accountability measures and reporting requirements to be announced. So for example, we hear that there is some provision around the bus driver salaries and how those will be reported and enveloped within the grants, but we're waiting further information. So that basically provides the highlights of the Grants for Student Needs, which is our ongoing permanent funding. And in the second half of your memo, you will see a chart of the priorities and partnership funding. Many of those PPFs are continuing this year, but we've highlighted the new ones in the chart. So in the math area, in lines 1, 2, and 3, we have additional funding for a board math lead, as well as 3 math facilitators. So that equates to about 4 positions. If we flip over to page 15, we see at the top under special education, there's a new PPF for removing barriers for students with disabilities. We won't know that amount because it's an application process, so that will still be coming. Moving down to the middle of the page where we see de-streaming and reading, line 18, we have the de-streaming and transition support of $2.3 million, which is specifically to hire teachers, and that will support the transitions and de-streaming in the classroom in grades 7 to 10. If we move down to line 21, we see further supports that will highlight the question from the last presentation. Education staff to support reading interventions of $1.3 million, so approximately equivalent to 12 positions. And I believe that's the only other new one is in the student support line 24. Again, that's an application-based one, which is for cooperative education supports for students with disabilities. So we'll determine that amount once we hear back from the application. Finally, turning over to page 16, there's a change in our capital funding. So we receive school renewal amount to provide renovations to our buildings, as well as school condition improvement amount to also provide renovations with slightly different criteria. When those funds are not fully spent, we get to carry them over from year to year. The ministry is now end dating that carryover with the expectation that we spend those funds by the end of 2026 for existing funds, and well, actually 2026 for the new funds, and 2027 for the existing funds. So those are the major highlights out of the Grants for Student Needs memo, as well as the Priority and Partnership Funds memo, and we continue to compile all the grants and align the expenses to be able to produce a bottom line that we will be presenting at the next board meeting on May 23rd, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Trustee Coburn.
Not a question, just a comment, just to say thanks for the presentation. It's incredibly complex, obviously, to pull this together, and the number of applications that need to be made for the priorities and partnership funding. I don't even want to count how many applications need to go in. And my other comment would be the benchmark under school operations, the benchmark at 2%. I don't know anybody who's living on a 2% increase other than maybe the Ministry of Education in the province of Ontario. But anyway, it seems arbitrary at best with regards to that, but I guess we have to live within that. But just to say thanks for presenting this. This is presented in a clear and concise format, and it'll be interesting to see where we end up when we put the budget together.
Thank you. Anyone else? Trustee Moore?
Thank you very much through you, Madam Chair. Question about the capital funding and the 2026 date for the, I'm just using the letters because I'll get mixed up otherwise, SCI and SRA allocations. Are we able to spend that money? Because oftentimes it's because just we don't have, people aren't available, contractors aren't available, materials aren't available, plans weren't ready yet. Are we going to be able to spend that money by 2026?
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair, and Trustee Moore. That's a great question. So the expectation from the ministry is that we put together some long-term plans for spending that money. Obviously, any accountant wants to hear that, and we do have a lot of data that is supported by the ministry for that. But you're absolutely correct. This money has accumulated over a number of years due to the supply chain challenges, so that's been carried over. We're starting to come out of those supply chain challenges right now, so the hope would be is if we put a plan in place, we'll be able to spend that money, but that's something that this is early on, so it's something that I haven't touched base with Superintendent Valley yet about that. The other piece of it that I think of when I look at this is when those deadlines go on and all of a sudden there's a rush on contractors, sometimes those prices can go up as well. So it could work against us in some respects, but we're going to give it our go to have it all spent so that we don't lose the funding.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for supplemental. It's the same funds I'm looking at. Did the ministry give any indication that we would get any funding to help with the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disability Act, where we have to get all of our bricks and sticks prepared for that? Or are they expecting us to not worry about the other third of Trinity's roof and do this?
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. There was no mention of any specific funding for that, so that would have to be incorporated into our existing budget in order to address those deadlines that are coming up.
Any other questions? Can I have a mover and a seconder for this report? Moved by Trustee Phelan, seconded by Trustee Moore. That the memorandum from the Associate Director of Business Affairs dated May 3rd, 2023, entitled 2023-24 Grants for Student Needs and Priorities and Partnership Fund Allocations be received. All in favor? Opposed? And carried. Our next item is a memo from the Associate Director of Business Affairs, re 2023-2024 preliminary budget information, Associate Director Shimmons and Manager Donnelly.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So we're at the point in our process that we're still rolling out the sections of the budget as they become available. So at our last meeting, we rolled out our Section C, which talks about the enveloping restrictions that we have to plan our budget under, as well as the enrollment projections. And tonight we have for you Section G, which is our department and school budgets, as well as Section H3, which is our other revenues. So putting it into perspective, our Section G, which is the department and school budgets, basically covers all of the expenses in our budget except for salaries, benefits, and capital. So it represents about 15% of our overall budget, but a lot of good work happens out of these department budgets through the various departments. And in Section H3, the other revenues, about 96 to 97% of our overall board budget is funded through GSNs, the Grants for Student Needs, but the remaining 3% is our other revenues. So that's what's going to be included or presented on this schedule tonight. And on that, I will hand it over to Manager Donnelly to share those schedules with you.
Thank you. So I will now review Section G1, Other Expenditures. So if you want to follow along, just click into the first link included in the cover memo. That's making a noise.
Turn it off.
Maybe it's just where I am. Here we go. I think it was just where I was, sorry. All right, so starting from the far left column, the schedule begins with the board-approved other expenditures from the 22-23 school year. It is then adjusted for any in-year budget transfers or adjustments, including PPFs that were released after our approved budget. Overall, you will notice an increase of $3.2 million between our original and revised budgets for the current year. This increase is mainly due to $945,000 in PPFs that were announced during the school year most notably our tutoring supports, $931,000 in transportation costs, which is offset by fuel escalator GSN revenues, $700,000 for student devices, and $407,000 related to Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program, which is to support investments in improving ventilation and air quality. There were also increases to school budgets to reflect enrollment growth, as well as additional PD funds for principals and vice principals funded through our Student Support Fund. So next, I'll review the 2023-24 preliminary budget request, which is the column to the far right. The preliminary budget for other expenditures totals $91.2 million. This reflects an overall increase of $2.2 million from the 22-23 revised budget for the current year. As we do enter a difficult budget year, we have taken a critical look at our other expenditure budgets, and we have reduced central budgets by approximately $1 million. High school budgets have also been reduced by 10%, or approximately $200,000, to help offset continuous inflationary increases for digital software, which is now purchased centrally. The budget also includes some inflationary increases beyond our control for items such as $1.6 million in utilities and service contract increases, $900,000 in transportation, $200,000 for system applications and academic software. Some increases also include investments in future efficiencies, such as moving to some system applications to a cloud-based solution, as well as new wellness software. We have also included another $2.5 million to continue the multi-year investment in our outdoor learning spaces funded through reserves, which was approved through the 2023 budget process. And finally, there's an initial provision of $200,000 for startup resources for our 2 new elementary schools that are set to open in September of 2024, as well as $200,000 for year 2 startup resources for St. Juan Diego and St. Bernadette. And then also for your information, we have included links to all the departmental initiatives and activity narratives if you want to see more detailed information about all the great work that our departments do. And the narratives also reference how we align with our strategic goals and commitments, as well as our spiritual theme. So now I will turn your attention to the next link in the memo, which is H3 Other Revenues. The total revenue for 2023-24 is currently projected to be $23.3 million, which represents an increase of $3.6 million over the prior budget year. The majority of this increase, $2.1 million, is related to new priority and partnership funds, or PPFs, which come in specific contractual expenditure criteria and outcomes and are one-time in nature in general. These are shown under the Government of Ontario section. There are 3 new PPFs that have been mentioned earlier, but I'll go over them again, that are to note in particular. The first is a de-streaming and transition to high schools in the amount of $2.4 million to fund additional teachers to support students in grades 7 to 10 to work directly with them to proactively prepare students for transition to de-stream courses. The second is education staff to support reading interventions in the amount of $1.3 million to provide teachers to work one-on-one or in small groups with students from kindergarten to grade 3 to provide reading supports to our students. And finally, the Math Recovery Plan, which consists of 3 grants totaling $800,000, which provides funds to help improve math results at our priority schools in grades 3, 6, and 9 through providing digital tools and math facilitators. This replaces the previous math strategy grant of $600,000. Also to note is the end of the tutoring support grant. That was $2 million in 22-23. The non-credit ESL grant has increased by $600,000 due to a new contract, which allows for more ESL classes. And as we move down the page, you'll see the link grants have also increased $300,000 for one-time additional funding applications. And fees from individuals have also increased $300,000, mainly due to our EDP programs. Finally, rental revenues include some inflationary increases, and our interest revenues have, of course, also increased due to higher interest rates. And that concludes my presentation for this section, so I'll turn it back to Associate Director Shimmons to conclude.
Thank you. We're happy to take any questions at this time.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Trustee Moore?
Thank you very much. I'm going to be looking at Schedule G. And I'm in Section 1. I'm making this easy for you, Ms. Donnelly. Specifically, I'm looking at the itinerant teachers for visually impaired. Now, in our SEAC, that's come up a bit, but this is one of the only line items that's actual cost to personnel, isn't it?
Through you, Madam Chair. Sorry. This is a contract that, yes, it is a contract through the public school board that is mostly staff, but there is some resources as well.
Oh, okay, so there are some resources, but if, see if this works. Okay, so if a student requires technology or braille printer, anything like that, that would come out of that amount, or would that come out of a SIA amount?
That does come, there are resources provided under this specific line as well. So that's why it fluctuates from year to year quite a bit, actually, because it's all based on the student needs.
Okay, and if a student required an EA, would that also be in that line?
No, that would not be part of that. So that would be separate as part of our EA process.
And if a student requires specialized transportation due to the nature of their disability, would that be under there as well, or?
So I think what you're referring to is the special education envelope.
Okay.
So I think there's a little bit of a misunderstanding sometimes that all of the cost of special education is in that envelope. So it doesn't include, the only thing that's in the special education envelope is just the incremental costs of classroom special education. So we are, in the current year, budgeted to spend $18 million more than our allocation, but that does not include costs for special transportation. It does not include administrative, any of the central office support for special education. And as well, so if we have a system class, if there's 23 students, which there isn't, but if there were 23 students in that system class, none of the cost of that teacher would go against that envelope. But because the classes are less than 23, so say half, 12, 8, 10, depending on the regulation, it's only the difference that gets charged against that envelope. So there's still funding outside of the special education envelope that is incurred to support special needs students that's not captured there.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you very much. Can I have a mover and a seconder to receive the report? Trustee Warren? Moved by Trustee Warren and seconded by Trustee Coburn. That the memorandum from the Associate Director of Business Affairs dated May 3rd, 2023, entitled 2023-2024 Preliminary Budget Information and accompanying budget documentation be received. All in favor? Opposed? And carried. Thank you very much. That was a great report. Section M, we have no new business. We have no notice of motions, and we need to have a confirmation of the action report. Can I have a mover? Trustee McEwen, seconded by Trustee Phelan. That the action report covering the period April 25th, 2023 be received. All in favor? Opposed and carried. We have no inquiries. Associate Director Donahue, administrative announcements.
Yes, Madam Chair, I have 3 brief announcements. First, I'd like to tell the Board of Trustees that Mayor Sutcliffe will be presenting an award for Ottawa's favorite crossing guard to Huda Irakic, a crossing guard at St. Thomas More Catholic School. She has been a crossing guard with the Ottawa Safety Council for 9 years, and the Mayor will make an official proclamation on May 17th at St. Thomas More Catholic School on Adult Crossing Guard Appreciation Day. So that's good news. The second item is another award. So our intermediate secondary math learning partner, Heather Lindale, was awarded the Ontario Association of Math Educators, or OAME, Award for Exceptional and Creative Teaching in Secondary Math. And this was presented to her recently at the OMA Provincial Conference. And third but not last, a belated happy birthday to Chair Mark Mullen, who celebrated his birthday on Saturday. As was mentioned earlier by Madam Chair, Chair Mullen is representing the board in Toronto, and although listening in, he is not able to join us, but he can hear our good wishes. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. And thank you to all of you for your patience, and I promise, Trustee Warren, that I will practice your name before the next meeting. Can I have someone move the adjournment of, Trustee, sure.
I just want to comment that the presentation that we heard in the delegation section this evening, I found the language to be inappropriate. And so I know he made a comment that he wants to present to the board, so I don't know if we can screen his presentation before it gets here, but I would suggest that that might be something that we do so that we get appropriate language used in presentations.
Thank you very much, Trustee Colburn. That's something that we will review at agenda planning if he's planning on coming again, so thank you. Okay, can I have someone to move to adjourn the meeting? Trustee Colburn, seconded by Trustee Melito, that the regular meeting of the Board of May 9th, 2023 be adjourned at 8:40 p.m. All in favor? Opposed and carried. Thank you very much.
Did you take note of the adjournment?